Hey guys, it's Mike Garrick with My Nutrition Body, and we're going to talk about probably the most important video that I'm ever going to do. It's called the bracing sequence. This is Kelly Starrett's bracing sequence. Now, what the heck is a bracing sequence? The bracing sequence is a way to properly organize the body. You see, 98% of our problems are caused by two different things. One, over-tensioning of certain muscles, meaning muscles are too tight, pulling the joints out of their proper alignment and missing range of motion, and what's called open circuits or open circuit faults, meaning like if your shoulders are rounded forward, head is an extension, lower back is too much extension or flexion, feet are open. These are open circuit faults. They cause problems in the body and the body joints. Now I want you to imagine the stress on a joint that's improperly aligned. Have you ever tried to saw something, saw a log or a board, and as you're sawing through, you get about halfway through and you lift up on this end, and when you do that, it actually binds the blade and you have to push 5 or 10 times harder to get that saw through. And what happens? That saw starts to flex and bow and can even break, right? Well, this is what I'm talking about, is that when the joints are put, when they're out of alignment and there's binds put on them, they can cause serious issues. Let's take a knife. A knife is made for cutting. You can use it for prying, but if you use it for prying long enough, you're going to chip the blade or eventually bust the tip right off. And another example is, let's say you have a bent rim on your bike, and you think that by going faster it's going to fix the problem. It's not. It's going to accentuate the problem. So we have to actually organize and put the body into its proper alignment on an everyday basis, not just when we step foot in the gym, but we're talking every single day, because you got to think on it. You got to think about it in terms of how many patterns or how many motions you're running on a day-to-day basis. You're training the nervous system. So what do? We need a model, and that model just happens to be this bracing sequence. And second, we need to condition that pattern. We need to condition that model. So in order to form a new pattern, it's thought that approximately 1,000 repetitions is needed. But in order to change a faulty pattern, it can be upwards of 10,000 repetitions. So if you're used to moving in a certain way, and if it's improper, and it takes you 10,000 repetitions to fix that movement, we need to get busy. All right, so let's run through it. I want you to remember 6 things: feet, butt, spine, core, shoulders, and head. You got that? Feet, butt, spine, core, shoulders, head. So here's what I'm talking about. All right, feet should be parallel. If you look down at your feet, right, if I'm looking down at my feet, your feet should be parallel to each other, and they should be sticking straight forward, and they should be directly underneath your hips. This is called a neutral foot position. And what you want to do is you actually want to screw those feet into the ground. So you want it to feel like your feet are going to externally rotate. You're trying to externally rotate them, but they're not really moving. And what's happening is when you do that, you're screwing your hip back into its socket. You're activating muscles that need to be activated. And what really happens is you'll feel your butt's going to grip, right, when you do this. So feet straight forward, directly underneath your hips, and screwed in. Number 2, butt. Grip your butt really tight. Now your butt's already going to be activated, but you're going to grip it even tighter. So grip your butt tight. And what that's going to do is, if your hips are tilted slightly forward or anterior, what that's going to do is it's going to pull them back into its neutral alignment, or a stable platform for your back to be on. So grip your butt. Number 3, spine. Spinal alignment, neutral spinal alignment. Now most of us are in what's called spinal extension or spinal flexion, right? So a lot of times when we're working out, we're kind of crunched over like this, either in a crunch position or doing tricep press downs or whatever, or if we're doing pull-ups, you know, we got that crazy arch in our back like this, and we got our feet back behind us, and we're in that hardcore hyperextended position. This is not a good place for your spine to be. Your spine should be in alignment, neutral alignment all the time. And you want to make sure that you have that. Now, how you do that and how you can test that is the two-hand rule. You take two hands, you put one hand right here at your sternum and one here down by your belly button or your hips. And what you want to do is you want to make sure that those hands are parallel. If you go into extension, you can see that they're not parallel. If you go into flexion, you can see that they're not parallel. You want to keep them neutral. You want to keep them parallel. That's the way you can test yourself to see if you're actually in a neutral spinal alignment. All right. So, number 4, core. Once you're in that neutral alignment, you want to get tight. Now, your core is considered from basically nipple line all the way down to like mid-thigh. But what we're talking about is right here, this part right here, your transverse abdominis. This is considered your core. And when I say get tight, I mean if somebody was going to come up and they were going to punch you in the stomach, what would you do? You'd go, huh, and you'd grip down, right? You would kind of bear down. Your stomach would get tight. That's what we're talking about. So when you go into spinal alignment, then you get tight. What you're doing is you're locking that position into place. This is so important. So when you're doing deadlifts and squats and curls and whatever you're doing, your spine is locked into that neutral position. All right, we have 2 more things. Number 5. Now, most of us are shoulder rounded forward. And the reason for that is all the stuff we're doing out in front of us. You know, we're texting, we're typing, we're driving, all the different things. So what happens is our shoulders start to migrate forward and up, and they internally rotate, right? So if you look down at your hands start to do this. And if your knuckles are pointing forward and your thumbs are pointing forward, this is not a good sign. So what do? Right? You want to bring your shoulders back into this position, right? Which is back and down and slightly externally rotated, right? So how you know is you look down and your thumbs should be like this. Your thumbs should be kind of pointing out in this direction. And your shoulder blades, your scapulas should be back and down. And it feels good. It might feel a little tight up here and you might need to do some smashing up here in the front to loosen this up so you can actually get back into place. But this is what's really interesting. Try this out. When you're out in front of you here like this, move your shoulder around. You don't feel very stable in this position, but as you start to step it back, and all of a sudden you'll come back here and bam, it hits this like shelf. And this is because this is a very protected position for your shoulder. As it migrates forward and internally rotates, it's a very risky position for your shoulder to be in, especially if you're loading it with a bench press, like if you're putting 200 pounds and you're trying to press that up. It's a very dangerous position for your shoulder to be in, and it's not a good place to practice to have your shoulder in, even just in everyday living. Now, last part. When shoulders are all the way back, now it's important to have our head back in place, right? Our head has a tendency to go forward like this and down, and how do our bodies adjust for that? We cock up like this. We go into this position like this. We get this extension in our cervical spine. So shoulders are back, head is back. Okay, you see where I'm at? Tragus is over the shoulder. It's pretty simple, you guys. So remember, number 1, feet parallel, straight forward. Very important. You don't want to be having your feet ducked out like this or pigeon-toed in like this. You want them to be straight forward, parallel, underneath the hips or slightly wider. Screw them in. When you screw them in, everything starts to activate from the floor up. Number 2, grip your butt. Your butt protects your lower back. Your butt is extremely powerful, and when you start to activate it, it's going to help out in so many different ways. And when we sitting or death by sitting, it's horrible because when you sit down, it deactivates your posterior chain and turns those muscles off. So we have to train it to come back on. We have to turn it back on. So grip your butt. Number 3, spinal alignment. Get your spine neutral. Remember, 2-handed test. Get tight. Always be 20% tight, right? You go in and you're going to do a max deadlift. You're going to be 150% tight, right? Or at least 100% tight. But when just walking around or sitting, you want to be 20% tight. And this takes practice. Right? After spine, we're talking shoulders, right? Shoulders, number 5, shoulders. We want to make sure that our shoulders are back, externally rotated. And then finally, bring your head back into place. This is what we want to do while we're standing, while we're walking, when we sit. We want to make sure that we hold this position, and it takes a ton of conditioning and repetition over and over and over again. But let me tell you something, it's extremely worth it. 2 years ago, I hurt my back, and I kept looking and kept looking and kept looking for something that actually made sense and that I could actually do on a day-to-day basis. And everybody talked about different posture and different techniques, but this ties everything in and gives you a model, a sequence to follow that you can do from the ground up to be powerful. As Kelly Starrett says, make your warrior stance your everyday stance, and your everyday stance your warrior stance. Don't underestimate the power of this simple technique. Get out there, get strong, and crush it.
Welcome to the future.